I thought I'd start with a story. As we launch the new mission of Linking the World tonight, it's important to me that you get to experience the why behind such a bold transformation, and frankly, the why behind my determination to lead such an effort. Linking the World is on a new trajectory, and through this process, we've created a new path, even for our sector. And it stemmed from lessons learned in the field, in these conflict zones, and it's stemmed from experiences that we've had at the organization. I wish I could take you with me to some of these places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia. I can't right now, but I can be a messenger. I can share some of the stories of the people that are living on the front lines. So I was working in Afghanistan, and I'd met a group of women. And we had to do this in secret because these women are living in a safe house. They're living in exile and in hiding because they had fled after being forced to be wives of Taliban fighters. And I told you that I'm going to tell you stories of people living on the front lines, but these women are not even living at all because they live in hiding, they can't go outside. Their children never see the sunlight. These women have no way to work, and going to school isn't even an option for these kids. There's one woman that I met in particular. The moment I knew her, I knew I would never forget her. And from the moment that I met her, I could tell that she was a beautiful and gentle person. Her hands reminded me of my daughters. You could tell she gets crafty, and they were strong, and they were graceful. But it's her face that's ingrained in my memory, because her face was covered in burns and in scars. Scars so big that they'd grown heavy over her eyes she could barely see. When I think about her now, I even feel a melting sensation on my face. You see, what happened was that she tried to run away. She was repeatedly beaten by her husband and her family, and his family. And when they started to beat their child, she knew it'd be a matter of time before she'd be buried in the backyard and no one would be looking for her. So one day, she scooped up her child and they ran away. But she was soon caught and brought back to the family, where her husband then did the honors to douse her with acid. Think about that. You run away to try and save your life, to save your child's life, only to be brought back to your family, and you look at your husband who throws acid in your face. As she struggled to recount what had happened to her, I found myself feeling very angry. And over the next few days, as we spent some time with her to gain an understanding of her situation, I saw firsthand her very hopeless situation. During some conversations, something that she said to me shook my world. I asked her, I said, what are your hopes and dreams for the future, if she had any? What are her hopes for her children? And what she said next is what changed my world. She said that compared to the fear and the instability that she's forced to live in today, she'd rather have the Taliban back in control. How could she say something like that with those burns on her face? If I hadn't seen it for myself, I probably wouldn't believe it. I probably would have been angry at her for saying that. This woman simply has no other alternatives. She explained to say that under Taliban rule, they provided schools, they provided food, medicine, and yes, living under Taliban regime was incredibly brutal and oppressive, but at least there was a semblance of order. She knew what to expect. Her children had some chance. This was the moment that changed my world. It's scary to think that Our enemies now aren't just tsunamis and earthquakes. As humanitarians, we have to think about what's happening to these communities when these extremist groups exploit desperation. I realize that our biggest competitors are these terror organizations, because they are very good at winning hearts and minds. They are very good at rule of law, security, meeting basic needs. They know how to tap into instability to further their agenda. If we're going to take the fight to the enemy, and there's no question that we will, innovation has to be a part of our winning strategy. When I took this role to lead Linking the World, I didn't want to allow Linking the World to be an organization that just adds to the white noise or reinvents the wheel. So we got the experts together and we studied the NGO sector. And as we continued working alongside our military in these conflict states, we started to recognize a gap. We started to recognize a problem that we were uniquely positioned to address, and that problem was that our sector wasn't innovating. We were trying to address the conflicts and disasters of today with Band-Aid solutions and with archaic response models that are decades old. It's misguided to think that we can combat today's new threats with a business as usual attitude. Think about it, where were you guys 5 years ago? 5 years ago, our world looked very different. Actually, 5 years ago today, we killed Osama bin Laden. Sure. But since then, we've seen the rise of other groups. Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab. We've seen the rise of ISIS. We've seen the Syrian war. And now we're seeing the rise of homegrown terrorists. It makes it clear that in our increasingly interconnected world, what happens over there affects us here at home. As an organization dedicated to furthering peace and stability around the world, when we recognized the gap, we also felt the responsibility. We didn't want to wait for someone else to do it, so we led the charge to challenge the status quo. And we researched where we can be proactive rather than reactive. So the days of triaging our way from one disaster to another, one conflict zone to another are over. Tonight I'm excited to unveil to you our new groundbreaking approach. We have a new innovative model that harnesses the power of predictive modeling and data analytics in order to break the cycle of poverty, ultimately providing people with more meaningful and lasting choices. Choices that serve as alternatives for having to support these extremist groups. As our competitors, as these extremist groups have become innovative, so must we. Just as they are harnessing the power of data and technology, we have to be working to do it better and faster. Because with better data, superior insights, and powerful programming on the ground, we have the ability, we have the opportunity to get to these communities before they do. Now, we have done a lot of work to get to this point. We've laid the groundwork to be able to have this competitive advantage. And we now have access to over 3,000 civilian military data sets and over 2,500 risk indices. This means that we have significant insight into which communities in the world are at the greatest risk. And we're also able to isolate and identify the root causes of instability in these communities. The co-creation and the programming on the ground with the local leaders is where the breakthroughs happen. We have a rigorous monitoring and evaluation system where we're able to assess real-time, based on the data and the feedback from the ground, whether these programs are working or not. And if they're not working, we recalibrate. We reiterate to make these programs that much more targeted. Now, I realize that we are living in a time where the new threats of today are affecting us here at home. and we have to think about how we're interacting with the world. When I think about the women that I meet in these places, when I see how there's very little that separates us, I wonder how I would feel if I'm living in these places and I was being forced to support a group that I didn't want, and there were people on the other side of the world that had the ability to do something. What would I want to say to them? I'd like to thank you for being here tonight. I know many of you are here because you believe in me, and I thank you for that continued encouragement. Many of you are here tonight because you've seen the work of Linking the World and you've seen what we've been able to accomplish just over the past few years. But we are all here tonight because we believe in the ideals of our nation. The world has never seen a greater threat to global stability and security than we have today in the rise of violent extremism. We need to bring the fight to the enemy before they bring the fight here. We have a very real opportunity to put an end to this threat in our lifetimes so that our children, that our grandchildren, no longer have to live in the shadow of fear and terror. I thank you for your courage and for your commitment to support this work, to be a part of this noble effort, because I believe that this is what reflects the best of what makes our nation so great. We have to step forward and take ownership as a global leader, because if we don't, I promise you, we will not like who's waiting to fill the void. We have a lot of powerful policymakers and decision makers that need us to blaze this trail, that are waiting for us to create this proof of concept, because they know how important this work is and what a critical component of our national security strategy this is. So I'm looking forward to working with you and sharing more with you. Thank you for being here tonight and for supporting our continued work and for celebrating this new launch and this new model for linking the world. Thank you.